I'd like to welcome you all to the next session. This is Eric Shepherd doing Demos RS. Thanks, Eric.
So a little story about the name of this presentation. I actually, early on when they started taking requests for space, I knew I wanted to try to do something, so I thought about it and I couldn't think of anything. So I said, well, I'll write some code and I'll do a demo, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I wanted the space, so I used the generic term demos RS for the slot, and I never got around to changing it. I actually originally had planned to do something completely different, but I wound up getting sucked down the rabbit hole of, hey, that was kind of fun, let's see if I could do something. Anyway, I wound up down the rabbit hole on the first project I worked on and never got off of it, so I've only got one thing instead of like 5 I had originally code. But hopefully you guys will bear with me and forgive me if I have any hiccups. I am planning to release my project today, and odds are good that you guys will find lots of problems because I was debugging until 4 hours ago, and there'll be another version before the end of KansasFest because that happens every time I come here because you guys are kind of awesome at finding all the little glitches in my... several of you have guessed that I've been working on a new version of Sweet 16, and that is true. Last time I was here, I vowed that the next version would be completely rebuilt in Cocoa, and that is false. That turned out to be a lot of work and is still underway, sort of. It is getting increasingly difficult, as it turns out, to work on old Carbon code for macOS 10, and I have had to find several clever workarounds to continue to work on this code as it stands. But it still works. It has been run briefly in OS 10.8. I know it at least starts up and runs, but I will keep working on that. But anyway, it does. I mean, 10.9. It works great on 10.8. That's what I did all my work on. Sorry. Anyway, so it doesn't look much different, other than being halfway off the screen. Looks about the same. You've got your usual desktop. Pardon the funky patterns that happens with these screens. It's in the Finder. It's all set up. This is version 3.0. It's got a lot of little changes, a couple little bugs fixed, that kind of thing. There are some nice things about it, and first thing I want to do is I actually want to quit because I want to start up. I don't know how many people have used the MU-Pack feature of Sweet 16. It's a feature that lets you basically bundle up your current configuration, all your disk images, your preferences, both for the Sweet 16 emulator itself, but also your GS control panel settings, all of that, into one macOS package file, so that you can then start up with that same configuration all the time. And I'm actually going to use my demo package here. And this one starts up with the same startup disk, but instead of all my usual disks, it starts up with a demo disk. And I think the first thing I'm going to do here is, I just realized I forgot to actually get this stuff over, and you guys all know what a hassle it is to get files into Sweet 16 nowadays, ever since Apple has started making HFS support increasingly non-functional in macOS 10, first with Snow Leopard, where it became read-only, and now if you haven't noticed in Mountain Lion, even the reading is really glitchy, where you'll see a lot of files in the directory, but if you try to copy them someplace, you'll get file not found errors because the files are not located when it's trying to read them. Really glitchy. So I thought, how can I make this better? And I literally have spent the last 5 years trying to figure out a way to do it. And Tony and a couple of other people, if they think about it, will remember the night on IRC where I had the revelation about it, because I started going berserk in IRC about how I had finally broken through and figured out how to do something. And so let's just... Wow. There are a couple of caveats. You can only drag them into a folder that is open in the Finder. Otherwise, what winds up happening is, if you're in an app or you don't drag it to a Finder window, it will ask you where you want to put them on your machine. Cancel that. So that works. But you know what? I've got these files that I want to go out the other direction. Well, that works too. Make that work was that took some doing going out. I don't know if you noticed the fact that the actual icon outline persists as you leave the window.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. But it does. Anyway, so those are the two big features for typical users of Sweet 16 is the drag and drop support. And the files are out there. They're hard to see because they wound up in funky places, but as you can see, you can open up this file. And then I could actually take this folder, which actually has apps in it, and you can see that all the stuff in these are there. And you can actually drag them right back again, and they still work, believe it or not. That was the first thing I did actually when I got it working, because I tried dragging Apple Works out and then back in to make sure it's still launched after being on the Mac, and it does. So, woo!
Does it require that Sweet 16 be in the Finder to work?
For dragging into a window, yes. It will actually work if I'm in, for example, let's actually make sure it still does, because I haven't done this in a while. And let's see, let's find Works GS up here.
What's your back?
Oh, it's on my desktop, isn't it?
What back was actually running?
This is 10.8.4 I'm running right now, so let's do this. Let's drag this file into here. And it asks me where I want to put it, and then I put it wherever.
If you were in Protos, that would just...
It does not work if you are not in a desktop application.
Sure.
Now, that is entirely because I was way too lazy to write all of the code to present some kind of interface for choosing where to put it while you were in a test environment. It can be done technically. I decided it was more trouble than it was worth.
I agree.
Do
you need to install any sort of sysadmin?
Yes, there are actually some add-ons. As is the case, has been the case in the past, you can get the tools disk that's integrated into Sweet 16, and it's actually this in it right here, Sweet Boot. And once that's installed, it works. There's a new user guide, which is now really easy to get to. It's right there, and it's a handy-dandy PDF. It's very pretty. It's all new screenshots. Some of those screenshots are actually the first time they've been recaptured since 1998. So that's awesome. And also, there are some links to download things like the Sweet 16 Starter Kit now. So you can download that from within Sweet 16 to get that stuff and use it. Yeah.
I'm guessing it's preserving all the resource forks in our
Resource forks are all preserved. Everything, yes.
That's just a prelude to my actual question, which is, are the resource forks in the same format as used by the Apple Talk server on Linux? Can I drag something out into a folder on an Apple Talk server on Linux?
It should work. I have not tried it personally, but it ought to work because it actually is using the Mac file system to do the transfer. I'll tell you how this works, and it's the skankiest of hacks I've ever done, and I'm very proud of it. Yeah, Tony, did you?
It absolutely works.
You've done it?
Because that's
Sweet.
all I have.
Yeah, he's one of 4 people who has tested it, and all 4 of them are at least at KansasFest. Where are the rest of you?
I've got that configuration on my lab, so I wanted to
Tony, Sean Fahey, where's Kelvin? You here, Kelvin? He's not here. Sean's back there.
Well, they've all seen it, so why would they come?
Yeah. And, Ewan actually also got it about a week ago. And he's actually the one who started the cavalcade of bug reports that resulted in my panic right now. So, thanks. Where was I before that? So yes, it does work. The trick that I'm using here actually is when you drag stuff back and forth, a disk image file is created. An HFS disk image is created using a custom copy of the HFS utils Linux package to copy the files from the Mac onto that image. Then it is ejected with it's got a special descriptor file on it that says, this disk image should be treated specially, and here's how to treat it. Then it inserts it into the GS, and the GS sees that file on that newly inserted image. It goes, okay, automatically copy all of these files to the folder whose coordinates match the mouse position, and dump them all there. And so that's really hideous hack, but it works really well. The only problem I've got with it really is that every once in a while, and I'm still trying to sort out why, every once in a while the disk image won't automatically eject properly afterward, and sometimes you'll see it sitting there left behind afterward. You just eject it and everything is fine after that. I'm still working out that issue. Anyway, and then it does a very similar thing going the other direction. The other big thing that I've done in this release, and I have used half of my time, fantastic, is I had previous, by the way, this version is the first version that requires an Intel processor, and it does require macOS 10.6 or later. The last version worked on 10.4 or later, so sorry, but you know, I had no way to test it on either earlier versions of macOS 10 than that, or PowerPC processor. So anyway, moving on. One of the things that I had previously was this really weird JavaScript scriptable debugger thing that I hacked into it because I wanted to have a debugger, but I didn't really have a grasp at the time on a good way to integrate it. Well, I learned a lot from that experience, and I have now ripped out that debugger, and I've started building an all-new one using web technologies that we have been working on at Mozilla, where I work. And so I have enabled it here, and I am going to attempt to connect to Sweet 16 from here on my iPad, and hopefully everything is still connected to the internet. And oh, that's right, it's broken on the iPad right now. The debugger is. It's not working in on the iPad. I just discovered that while standing up here. No, I'll do it from here. Localhost 6502. So here's the Sweet 16 debugger. Let me see if I can make my window wide enough on this screen. I cannot. It's designed for a wider and taller screen than I can have a projector here, so I apologize for the funky wrapping. This is now connected to Sweet 16, and I can actually show you that. It's actually asking Sweet 16 for this version information. Now, I literally started working on building this debugger 3 weeks ago, so there are a lot of things it doesn't do yet. The stack display has only been working for like 5 days. So pardon all the things that I'm going to tell you don't happen yet. I expect many improvements coming up soon because all those other projects that I told you I was going to work on, the reason I haven't worked on them is because I need this thing working, and so expect that to be iterated on. But let's do something here. Let's go into the debugger again here, and let's set a breakpoint so that it stops the 6502. And you know what? We're going to do something really insane. We're going to set it on the toolbox dispatcher. Now we're in a GS application right now, so this is going to break into the debugger immediately. And boom, it does. And so now we are looking at the vector at E1000, as I call it. And we'll just step on into that vector. And now we're into this looks like it's actually a toolbox patch. Somebody has patched the toolbox vector because here it's looking for one of the miscellaneous toolset calls. And we can see our stack here, and we can see the registers up at the top, and bits of the processor status are highlighted in red as they change, black as they are set more clear. And register values, and the values actually become red as they change, and then any step that they don't change in, they become black again. So we can continue to step through this. It shows us, up ahead and also past instructions we've executed. And we can scroll ahead into the future to see what's coming, barring any breaks. It doesn't predict branches, I should say. So there's lots of stuff here, and we can just, we can continue. Now it's going to break again immediately, so we're going to disable the breakpoints and let it continue to run the GS here. And so that's the very basics of the beginning of a debugger. Now this is all done. That debugger is entirely written in HTML and JavaScript, CSS, standard web technology using a JSON-based WebSocket protocol to communicate back and forth. I have written documentation for the protocol, and I'm actually going to share that documentation so that other people can write debuggers. But there are other interesting things you can do with this protocol. That's where my iPad comes in. Okay. So now, I've connected to Suite 16 using my iPad. It uses touch events, so I can do this.
Are you connected through a web browser?
Yeah, this is Safari on my iPad.
Okay, so so in other words, you don't have to sell something through the App Store.
Right. And I can control my Suite 16 from my iPad. Now this is also a hack because it is basically using the debugger protocol to do this. It is actually pulling a ping image of the GS screen from a special URL that the GS emulator just serves up. Whenever somebody asks for a specific URL, it sends a ping image along. So this is downloading a ping from the emulator every 25 times a second.
The emulator could be running across the LAN.
Yes, it could be. It could be running anywhere. So it is pulling that image 25 times a second and refreshing it, and then sending mouse and keyboard events back to the emulator using the same JSON protocol, and receiving a new ping image with the results, basically. And that's all that's happening here. It's not doing any GS processing here at all. It's literally just sending events back and forth. It's a huge hack. Like, to click the mouse, there's actually a button down here at the bottom, click, and there's actually another one for double click, and stuff like that. But I do have, like, press the mouse toggle, and now I can move, release the mouse toggle, because of some issues I was having with the mouse events and wanting to have something fun to show with my iPad. So, but it shows the kinds of things that this protocol is going to let people do, right? And again, I'm going to be releasing a document for the protocol later today. Now, not all of the protocol's features are implemented yet, but it's getting really close. So I'm really, really excited about this release. Obviously, there's a lot of neat stuff for the users in there in terms of getting files in and out, which has sort of been a big hassle the last couple of years. And there are some other little improvements, and I'm actually going to talk about some of those tomorrow when I kind of go into a more using Suite 16 and setting it up kind of thing. So I'm actually going to wrap it up here because I want to have some time for people to ask questions or whatever. So that's what I came with this year. As far as availability goes, like I said to everybody earlier, I'm going to post a URL to the KFest mailing list this evening. I haven't done it yet because literally I haven't. My plan originally had been to do all the website updates last night, and then we wound up debugging all of last night instead, so I'm going to do that this evening and get a URL for downloading it out tonight. So I hope people like it. Please let me know, grab me or send me an email, whatever, if you run into any problems with it. I won't be surprised if you do. It was last time Carl found the bug, and I had to release a new version while at KansasFest to fix it because it was like serious. So please do feel free to grab me if you have any problems with it at all. Now, for the guys who helped me make sure that this worked out, I have something for you. Because I just want to say thank you very much. Tony, you were the first one to test this thing. So for you, gift card. Tony found a lot of conversion bugs and helped me get it ironed down to the point where it was really genuinely ready to send to other people, because when I first started sending them to him, it would be like, you know, all it would do was mount the temporary disk image and you'd have it sit there. Or, you know, you drag it in and you know, funky weird stuff would happen, but one file would copy and stuff like that. And we put up with a lot of those before it finally was really working. And then I also want to thank Dane Meter. He was one of the last people to come on board. He's actually another part of the reason why the last few days were a headache. I actually have one here for Sean, but I don't see him. Is he here?
He was upstairs.
He's upstairs? Okay. Well, this one's for Sean. And then I have one for a symbolic one for Ewan, but he's not actually here. So I'll give Sean his in a minute.
Hey, if you send that one to you and he won't be able to use it.
I know, it's totally symbolic.
Okay.
So, anyway, any questions about all of it? Does anybody have questions or anything? And also feel free to pull me aside later with questions. Yes.
Whatever address you put into your iPad to access 316, there must be some security involved that would prevent me from doing the same.
There is none. What's that? Yeah, could you? Yeah, that'd be awesome. No, there's no such security in place unless you actually have like firewall rules established. No, there is none. And in fact, you can actually connect to the GS from more than one machine at once and be like dueling controlling. Yeah, that totally can happen.
So like kindergarten cop.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that is partially by design because I find it convenient to be able to just grab whichever of my gadgets isn't busy and connect into it. That said, obviously, you know, there are concerns there, and that's something I'm going to have to figure out. You know, like I said, this stuff literally I started working on it 3 weeks ago, and so it's very much a beginning thing. Now you can just shut it off. You know, this time. There's a preference to shut it off. In fact, it defaults to disable the entire debugging system. So, obviously, there's also a built-in web server that serves up the debugger files themselves and the shared screen support stuff, because it's really just a hacking demo. But it's actually integrated into Sweet 16.
Thank you.
Oh, Casper 2.0.
So yeah, there's going to be more work done on this stuff to make it even more cool, and I would be very surprised if there's not, you know, updates over the next weeks.
So this is version 3.0?
This is version 3.0 now, yes. Odds of there being a 3.0.1 by Friday, 75%.
One last question for those of us who are not technically inclined. What are the advantages of converting from Carbon to Cocoa?
There are a couple of advantages. Number one, the developer tools, the actual current versions of the developer tools no longer directly support writing Carbon code. I actually had to copy over stuff from older developer tools to make it work. And the current developer tools cannot, they can't edit the user interface files any longer. So I actually have to run the older versions of the user interface editing tools in a virtual machine to work on them. So it's a little bit of a tricky dance to do. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that each release of macOS 10, they're actually getting rid of some of the old Carbon routines. They're being pulled out. So each time Apple releases a new major update to macOS 10, there's a chance that they're going to start pulling out stuff that I use. And so the longer that goes on, the harder it gets to keep things working. So I got to get to Cocoa eventually. There's also the advantage that if I had it on Cocoa, then at least I could put it on my iPad and just run it there. I might not be able to give it to anybody else legally, but I can have it. Yeah.
So if Apple wanted to kill your Apple II, what Carbon would they pull out?
Quick turn. when they remove Quick Draw, that'll be the end because it's about half the graphics are still done with Quick Draw. I'm changing them over time to use more modern APIs, but I use a lot of Quick Draw routines still to do my graphics. And that's actually left over from a half-hearted attempt somebody did to port it to Mac OS 8 way back in the day. Anybody else got anything? Questions?
You said some of the screenshots from the documentation dated back to '98. Sweet 16 isn't that old.
The VOS version is. Some of the screenshots in the 2.6 Sweet 16 for Mac OS 10 documentation were actually pulled out of the VOS version documentation.
Thank you. I do remember that.
The VOS version was kind of cool and unique in a lot of ways too.
It had features that I still don't have, you know.
It was called Ernie, wasn't it?
That was its kind of its code
Mascot.
name.
It also had, because of VOS's focus on multimedia, aside from the Mark Twain GS, which has the best sounding audio coming out of the 2GS ever,
It had
was
better.
Sweet 16 on VOS was amazing.
It had amazing sound. It was just phenomenally good. And it also had video recording ability, and it support. You could actually plug SCSI drives directly in, and the GS access them as if they were plugged into a GS SCSI card. And it had the where it would do telnet connections as if you were on a serial port. So serial programs would do telnet connections to other servers. That was cool too. But I never got around to implementing that on the Mac because nobody does that kind of stuff anymore to speak of. So it's not relevant anymore. Yeah.
In the debugger, can you? I mean, I'll play with it later. But can you change memory values or
Not
flash
yet.
states?
The protocol has defined JSON structures for that. Code not implemented yet, not even on the emulator side. So that's coming very soon because that's one of the features I need. You can't change register values yet. You can't change memory values yet. There's nothing like searching memory or anything like that yet. That's all stuff that I've got planned but isn't done yet.
Are there launch points?
No, although again, the protocol is all figured out. I just haven't had a chance to implement it.
Yep.
I even have figured out how to implement most of this stuff, but it was just a matter of time. It was literally like, how much of this stuff can I cram in before now? And then about a week ago, it was like, I got a week to go. I still got a couple of actual crashing bugs. Time to switch focus, and so I stopped working on the debugger about a week ago. So that was pretty good for 2 weeks. From not even thinking of it until all of a sudden, hey, I could try doing it. So it's pretty good. I'm proud of it. I'm happy with it for the amount of time I put into it.
Yeah, one.
So some people work hard on the code and get to go to Las Vegas.
I worked hard on the code so I could go to Kansas City. That's right. So I could go to Kansas City and not suck, basically. And so I hope people like it.